All right. Welcome to yet another community call for Tempo, March 2025. I was not present for the majority of this agenda creation. It's going to be a bit of a surprise to me. I can ramble through this, but I imagine other people have a better sense of what we're doing. In fact, I will start with the top one because that's easy and exciting. And then I'll hand over to whoever would like to handle the second one. First of all, we're going to thank our new team members. Ruslan started a couple months back. Matt is, I don't even know if he's technically on the team yet, but he's really freaking close. If he's not, it's like this week or next week or something.
Yes and no at the same time.
Okay. I don't know what that means, but both are great developers. Super excited to have impactful people. And we've seen a lot of growth in Tempo internally. We're getting a lot more headcount because of that, and expect to see heavy development in Tempo or increasing momentum on our development in Tempo. Very excited about the future of where we're headed, given the amount of attention we've been getting. It's been growing. I know the last few years have just been very, very strong growth internally on Tempo. Also externally, community's been picking up, everything's been picking up, very excited about it. So Russell and Matt are new, and I'll go ahead and cheese this one forward. Also on team member announcements, Carlos somewhere down here. Where did I put
It just says new maintainer.
New maintainer, and I just searched for
It's a
maintainer
mystery.
and went, oh, I ruined it. Spoilers, it's not Carlos. Oh, there it is right there, thank you. Carlos started a few months back. In this link, you see the PR to make them a maintainer. There's some links off of that into a lot of their work in Tempo. They've been doing great work in open source Tempo. Also great work internally, helping us set up our operations and other things that are not visible to the community. But very excited for Carlos. Just been a fantastic team member, proven themselves the last few months, and feel free to dig into their PRs. Everything's quality, for sure. All right, team is growing. We're excited on our side. What's up next? Who would like to discuss new TraceQL features?
I think each of these features has an author, so I can talk over them. I have a question for sum over time.
Okay.
I'd like to know what's the difference between sum over time and rate and increase. When should I use each one?
Only Javi can answer that question. Javi, can you answer that question?
That's about it.
Yeah, the rate is essentially how it grows, the metric, and the sum is essentially you take all the values and you sum all together.
Rate is the count of spans per second, right? Increase is the count of spans, but over the step. So like if your step is 5 minutes, it'll be the amount that increased over that 5 minutes, right? Rate, yeah, I think, is more easily
no increase.
to. I'm sorry?
You're talking count over time. We don't
we don't have it. Are you sure?
It's count over
You're
time
right.
is the number of spans in that step. Rate is the same thing divided by however many seconds.
Thank you.
But yeah.
Clearly we know TraceQL. Sum over time is unique in that it takes a parameter. The other ones just count the spans. Sum over time takes any parameter, attribute, any number, or numerical parameter, and we'll just add those up over the step, basically. And step is not settable in old versions of Grafana, but I think current versions of Grafana have a little block where you can type in a custom step if you'd like. The past versions let Tempo pick whatever step it came up with, basically. All right. Top K, bottom K is in flight. If Siraj exists, they could talk about it.
Yeah, so right now, if you write a query, you get bazillion series out. You can. With this, you can only get top or bottom K series. So you can write a query like, rate by client IP and only give me the top 10 or the bottom 10 client IP. So this allows you to do second stage operations on top of TraceQL metrics. This behaves almost as Prometheus top K and bottom K. So functionally, it's similar. So it will look at top K items per step. So if you say top K10, you might get more than 10 series, and that's by design. That's it.
Thanks, Raj. That's a little bit paired with another PR that's in flight to constrain the max number of series queryable in Tempo. Right now, that doesn't exist, which allows for, you could technically write this query in Tempo. Feel free to do it if you'd like to crash your local Tempo. So you can rate by something of infinite cardinality, trace ID, span ID, whatever. This is going to create hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of series. It will make Tempo quite zen. And so this top K, along with another change to constrain max series, will help. Oh, hey, I didn't know if you're here, Fam. Will help fix that. Fam's been working on the max series because in cloud, people have occasionally just straight blown up the query front ends and the queryers by executing queries like this. Fam, anything you want to add? Maybe only through emojis. Oh no, hey, never mind.
I mean, you kind of said it all, but I mean, we a few iterations ago we added, you can search by span, by span ID, and I love when people write by span IDs. It's great.
That makes us all happy here on call. That's right. So yeah, these are I'd say that's been a major theme of the past 5 to 6 months of Tempo development. Is kind of the growth in cloud has pushed us to find all these operational gaps, things that, Loki and Mimir have already found years ago, but we didn't quite realize, and finding new query patterns, new data patterns that blow up Tempo, and we're just kind of patching that. I'd say Tempo is operationally most sound today that it's ever been. But we still have a list of these kind of things to improve the way that you operate it and the stability in the face of the insanity of users, right? New intrinsic, I think Spam did that too. Did you do parent IDs, Spam?
I did.
Nice. Just gonna confirm that.
Yep.
Okay.
No emoji. No emoji.
I need your emoji feelings about span parent ID. That's right. So the parent ID is oh, you have a presentation for Mario. Cool. The parent ID, the parent ID is pretty simple. Intrinsic span parent ID equals, we still have not built this. It is something I really want to build. Parent name equals food. It might require an iteration on the backend format. At the least, if we shoehorn it into our current one, it would be costly, a very expensive query to run. So this is still on the list. It's still very valuable to me, but it is harder than we expected when we made the original TraceQL spec. And so it's still just kind of on the back burner. But like I said, Tempo's getting a lot of people, a lot of momentum to handle a lot of projects. And so I think suddenly things like this in the next maybe 6 months to a year are becoming addressable, where before we just didn't have the bandwidth and we were just keeping the wheels on and adding the most obvious features. So this is cool. This is way more cool, but way harder. And I'd like to see that in the next, maybe year or so would be awesome. Don't hold me to that. Moving forward, Project Rhythm. I was invited to open somewhere. Where's Slack? There it is.
Yeah, presentation.
A presentation by our own Mario.
Yes.
Speaking of, 3 days after Mario's Day, March 10th is Mario Day. We always celebrate it on Tempo. We're very excited for Mario on his day. So let's all give him a round of applause. Thank you, Mario. And we'll give the floor over to him to talk about TraceQL metrics, apparently.
Right, yeah. So I wrote Project Rhythm. It's the internal name for this change that we're doing to Tempo's architecture. And I thought of using the same slides that we used in May last year when we first floated this idea. Time flies. And back then we were presenting some issues that we have now with Tempo's current architecture. And we were thinking of introducing a queue-based architecture, potentially Kafka. It was a bit undefined. But since we've made a lot of progress in this project, and we're currently working on it, developing and testing the new changes, we can confirm that we've gone for the Kafka API for this change. And yeah, we've switched to a queue-based architecture. Yeah, back then we only had this. We didn't know how it was going to look like. But right now we're currently, yes, on that step. So so far we've been focusing on introducing Kafka into the right path, and this has created a new component in Tempo, which is the block builder, which is now building blocks. In the future, it will replace the ingester as the main component building blocks for object storage. But so far, currently, the responsibility is still shared between both. I don't know if we want to go over the original questions. We want to go into more detail what the future plans are, what we're currently testing, because I can talk about rhythm for a couple of hours at least.
Let's not.
So yeah, tell me what to focus on.
I think where we are currently would be great, and I also think this end goal would also be great. I think like telling people where our where our state is, so they know kind of the progress, and then what things we intend things to look like when we finally cut this thing with documentation, Helm support, everything, what they should expect when they actually operate it.
All right. So the main goal is like two things. We want to separate read and write path. That's a necessary change for the other goal, which is we need RF1 replication factor 1 for all the data in Tempo. Tempo currently runs based on a replication factor 3 architecture. That means that each write, it's replicated into 3 ingesters. And after the introduction of metrics, we realized that idea didn't work very well for metrics, mainly because of how jobs are sharded for metrics, but that's going too much into detail. Basically, we want to run with replication factor 1 to only have 1 copy of the data. So for that, we're introducing a queue-based architecture that adds the durability guarantees are now provided by the queue, basically. So yeah, so the previous slide, this is where we are currently. We've introduced this new architecture to the write path. So there's this new component, and also the metric generators are also reading from Kafka. The ingesters are still untouched. So basically right now we have 2 ingestion paths, one for like the old architecture and one for the new architecture. The next step and the future form of Tempo will be this one, in which there is a single write path, and the read path is migrated to sort of like the new architecture to only read these new RF1 blocks. So the ingesters will stop generating blocks. They'll receive a single copy of the data, which they'll hold in memory and answer queries for recent data. And the responsibility of building and shipping data to object storage for long-term storage will be in the new block builder component. And we hope that this will basically enable TraceQL metrics to run at a much higher performance, and we'll be able to query longer time ranges, and Tempo will just work better and faster.
That's right.
So once this is accomplished, we'll provide migration guides. won't be different to what we're doing because we're migrating tempo deployments ourselves. So I think by then we'll have a lot of experience of what can go well, what can go wrong, and all the necessary steps to do a step-by-step migration without any downtime. We'll maybe got a new version of Tempo. I think that's still undefined when and how. We also, of course, will introduce support in all the deployment options that we offer. I think the most common used is the home charts. We'll update the home charts to support, I don't know, a Kafka compatible solution like Red Panda or something that's open source. And yeah, we basically expect to sunset classical tempo for rhythm tempo eventually.
Cool. Edgar has a question if you want to field that. Oh yeah, so block builders, are they going to be a replacement for the compactors? And Mario, you can field that. I can answer it. What do you think? You just muted yourself. I'll go. Okay, so
sorry. Yeah, no, they're not going to be a replacement. You can think of block builders as an extension of the injustice. They're taking some of the responsibility from the injustice into another component.
Right. So compactors is missing from this. Compactors will remain. We expect there to be significantly less pressure on the compactors. And part of our kind of like TCO prediction is that you'll have to run significantly fewer compactors and they'll be doing significantly less work. There's memory issues in compactors. People file issues with this all the time in Tempo. And what a lot of people don't know is that primarily the memory consumption of compactors is due to combining the traces, and that's going to a lot of that's going to go away with the RF1 architecture. So we expect compactors to remain, but we expect there to be significantly fewer of them. Right. The block builders just turn data into blocks that are in object storage. The ingesters just allow querying of recent data. Is what those two components are going to do. About Kafka, do you consider workflow tool like temporal instead of job queue? I don't. Does anybody know what temporal is or can speak to that? I'm not sure what temporal is. And Pavel, you raised your hand if you want to ask your question while I go figure out what temporal is.
I think I answered my question already.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. So I don't know what this is. We are going to support the Kafka API. And we're going to try to use a minimal set of the API so that it will be as portable as possible. We are not going to guarantee it can work with anything because we will only be operating against Kafka, basically, or we're going to use WarpStream, but that doesn't matter. But we expect anything that is Kafka compatible to work. Now, we say that about object storage too. S3 compatibility works, and then people try to use it on like some other hosting provider like DigitalOcean's S3 compatible thing, and it doesn't work. So we're going to do our best to keep the API surface that we use minimal, which should improve the portability as much as possible. For using other queuing things like temporal, we will likely put very little to no effort into that. What I would like to see from the team that's working on this, though, is a interface where maybe community members can implement their own. If somebody loves temporal, or I don't even know what temporal is, but some other queue that we don't support, then we would accept a PR to add support for a new queue, but it would be behind an interface, and it would be kind of up to the community to maintain those because we wouldn't use those. So that would be my stance on any of the billion other queuing options that exist out there.
Okay. Right now, I think at least the initial implementation will be tied to the Kafka API. But I think, yeah, we're not using a lot of Kafka. So as long as whatever other implementation support some basic requirements, like some concepts that we're using. And like it remains open for the future. But yeah, for now, I think we're going to be very tied to Kafka. Also, to mention something that I forgot, we're also expecting Rhythm to help with TCO, reliability, durability in general. TCO, we still don't have numbers because we've not done the entire migration. But even with the added cost of the Kafka or whatever, or the system you use, just the smaller ingesters flushing less data will be flushing a fourth of the data that Tempo is flushing right now. We expect it to be quite a huge savings. And also in terms of reliability, there are certain issues with the current architecture, with the ingesters being too big, too stable, being read and write path components. There are many challenges that this change is aiming to fix or alleviate.
Yep. Pavel asks, is the data still sharded in the ingesters? I'll answer that real quick. Yes. So block builders, generators, and ingesters will still like co-locate a trace. They all have the same needs to do, for instance, the structural queries, right? As well as in metrics, we do service graphs. We have to look for two edges in the same trace. The block builders, we want the same kind of like capabilities in TraceQL to exist on the blocks and storage as in the ingesters. So yes, all of these are going to behave the same. They're going to pull from the queues. The partitions are sharded by trace ID just as they are now. Andre asks, can you share which implementation of Kafka we'll use internally? The answer is, I said it earlier, WarpStream. We'll be using WarpStream internally. I would be surprised, given what we're using, it would not work with a lot of the other options that are out there. DigitalOcean S3 is not compatible. I have no idea. It probably is. I just picked one out at random, but every once in a while we get this issue that's like, Tempo doesn't work on this, and it's some other S3 compatible thing. And then you go to their docs and it's like, we're S3 compatible for these APIs. And then here's the long list of things we don't do that S3 does. And it always kind of, gets into details. So when I say Kafka compatible, I mean, we can't guarantee it's going to work with all of the Kafka compatible things out there. But given the amount of the API we use, I do expect it to be mostly compatible across the board. Thank you, Javi, linking the WarpStream website.
I think it might be a good idea to list what endpoints and like what's the surface of the Kafka API that we'll be using. That way people will know what's compatible and what's not. But yeah, so far it's very little.
Yep. Thank you. That's a great idea. If we just list these are the 3 APIs we use, these are the features we use on those calls, it really help people find out what it's compatible with. I think, I mean, I don't know, we are a ways from this, but I believe my goal is in the Helm chart to ship a tiny Kafka thing. And for most people running like single binary, it's just going to work. They won't even notice. It's just going to be this little Kafka thing sitting there. But we should also provide the ability to drop in, right, like an endpoint, because you chose manage Kafka over here or over there, or you're running your own like Kafka cluster somewhere else in your org. Thanks, Suraj. Also linking to maybe another option. I'll tell you the thing we've struggled the most with Tempo is when people have some random on-prem S3 compatible like Dell or something appliance, and Tempo just crushes it, and they don't know why, and it's because it just can't keep up with S3. All right. Anything else about Kafka, RF1, Tempo Rhythm? We are running this in our dev cells. We are pushing it into our ops cells now, not quite there, but we're close, and we're going to try to be rolling out to prod in the coming months, the phase 1 and then phase 2 following that. So there'll be continued information here in this community call about TCO impact and migration, how it's going. We'll keep everyone up to date for sure. All right. We'll move forward, but this is a very, oops, I meant to close the other thing. This is a very loose presentation. Feel free to continue to ask questions in chat there or unmute. Anything is fine. And at the end, we'll ask for an AMA. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of questions already. Oh no, my bad. These are some of the questions that have been asked. Thank you for whoever's keeping track. All right, so Project Rhythm. Nice. Compaction changes. I believe Zachary Leslie will be discussing this, but I don't want to put him on the spot if he's eating a sandwich.
No, not for another like hour probably. Yeah, so we've got some compaction changes coming up. This is sort of driven by the Rhythm project. We are noticing that compactors duplicate a lot of data. And this is for a number of reasons. There are just edge cases, scenarios, those kinds of things. But basically, blocks can get compacted multiple times and end up with duplicate data, which is going to affect metrics. And so we want to be a little bit more consistent. So here we have, yeah, some data for sure. A small percentage. Yes. Thank you. We have a little bit of a design doc internally. We've been going back and forth on. I've got a PR up that is a work in progress. Tests are passing at the moment. I expect to be having this run in our dev environment in the next week, and then we'll go forward from there. I'll probably mark it ready for review by the end of the week, depending on how review goes. You will see how we take it one step at a time. It introduces two new components. There's a scheduler and a worker component. The workers will replace the compactor component. So we expect to be turning down all the compactors. And what happens now is that jobs for compaction will get scheduled, which means there will be a central location. We don't have to rely on the ring, propagation delay, et cetera, to determine the jobs which end up creating the compaction. And we would just want to be really consistent about that. We want to reload jobs from the cache. We want to make sure that we only hand out jobs which we are not currently working on other blocks, et cetera. There will be potentially future jobs that we want to do on the back end, like trace redaction, and I imagine retention. Tenant retention will also go into this. So anyway, there's a PR up. Feel free to review, leave comments if you care. If not, Joe's got plenty of comments. So, yeah, that's a little bit where we're at. Any questions?
I'll point out that I know this sounds complicated, but this will be seamless in comparison to the Kafka changes, right? The RF1. This you might even notice this changes if you were to deploy like one Helm chart to the next. It's kind of just shuffling the responsibilities a little around of compaction. So that we don't duplicate data, which happens occasionally, we found. And this is basically creating like a central source of the jobs that then a series of workers, which basically are the compactors, pull from. And the reason we chose this is there's a lot of reasons. And I think to shed light on why we're kind of adding a new thing, this block scheduler, or whatever it's not block scheduler, my bad, the scheduling component, is we do see some potential growth here. So a common request that we struggle to meet in cloud is like, I would like to delete all traces that match this query. It's very hard for us right now. We basically have to run a batch process to do that. And something like this might start filling that role is kind of a longer term vision of this piece, is adding capabilities to Tempo for your users where like, oh man, we push this attribute and it has PII. This might have the ability to submit a series of jobs to rewrite blocks to redact all of those attributes. So it is kind of a step forward. I do think the complexity is way smaller than it may sound. And I also see a lot of potential here for growth and capabilities in Tempo, which is why we chose this path.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll see, it might even reduce TCO. It'll give us a little more indication of, what we're doing as far as compaction, and we could scale these separately in a way that doesn't, multiple jobs don't get run at the same time, which conflict on block IDs, et cetera.
Yep. On that note, compaction is like one of the oldest processes in Tempo, and it's had very little attention. This is the first major change in years. And so like Zach said, I do think we're going to, this along with the change in the blocks that are created are really going to reveal to us, I think, a lot about how compaction works, what it does. And so I do think we're going to find some savings here too through this work. Cool. I think this is great stuff. Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it. All right. I, in a panic right before this meeting, threw a bunch of PRs of note. before I knew there was any agenda because, like I said, I was in a bunch of meetings right before I walked in here. So I'll just kind of quickly point out some of these. We've been through quite a bit. I won't go into all the details because that's probably a lot, but these are interesting things. If you want to keep up with cutting edge tempo, tip of main, these are the big things coming through. First, I'm going to highlight some from the community. Edgar restored some logging that we lost in 2.7. Somebody just today, I think, added the ability to do IPv6 on the distributors. We, due to Edgar's work also, fantastic community member, Edgar, thank you, pushed us to revert some changes to our compression. So that is in 2.7.1, and of course will be in 2.8. There's the PR there. And then somebody in the community is maintaining a Nomad example. And our examples, we have almost no expertise of Nomad internally. We use Kubernetes, but I think it's cool. The community's grown so much that somebody who's super into Nomad has provided this. So if you love Nomad, if you want to deploy there, please help us maintain this and gain some information from this, gain some knowledge from this too. We've seen a lot of performance improvements in the last month even. Right here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 PRs that all are going to start shaving performance. Personally, I think we've done a great job at the low level. I think we can improve, of course, but at the low level, I think we've had a lot of attention. In my opinion, the next big performance gains, except for Rhythm, will come from job throughput. And that's kind of a personal focus of mine, to figure out how to take tens or hundreds of thousands of jobs and get them to individual queries, bring all that back, recombine. It's a lot of work. And trying to reduce those jobs and improve the performance of farming those out is a big, or something that's in my mind, I think, at the moment. But yeah, a lot of cool performance improvements there. Feel free to dig into those. There is a panic. It's in 2.7. There's the fix right there. There's a little grimacing face, so you know how I feel about it. The panic really only impacts people larger installs. No one has reported this from the community. We do see it in our cells. If you are seeing this in your tempo clusters, raise some noise about it, and we will port it back to 2.7. At the moment, no one's saying anything, and so we're just going to put it in 2.8. But if suddenly a lot of people start showing up and are showing this, they're seeing this instability, we will absolutely get it in a 2.7.2. But it really does only impact particularly large cells with lots of reads, lots of read traffic. And then finally, Carlos is doing some work here. We are looking to improve the consistency across all endpoints of what we log and what we metric in terms of how many bytes are at all those little metrics and statistics that come back with a TraceQL query, trace by ID query. We want that to all be the same across everything. So that's what this final link here. All right, and we have quite a few questions, but I think, have we answered all these? Is there anything else we can do for you all? Any other questions? They can be about Rhythm. They can be about an you saw last week. Feel free to ask whatever you'd like. We're here. This is a great opportunity to connect to the people who work on this every day and to get some insight and help. If not, I believe we basically have everything answered. Is anybody afraid when they see the little Kafka symbol in a diagram? Do they start? Zach is okay. Zach, your job is to represent Andre. Also, Andre, see, you and Zach need to hang out apparently.
I would like to see that interface. I think the interface for public contribution of other queues would be cool. I understand that's a later thing though. No big deal.
Right. We do not have the bandwidth for this. If someone wants to work on this, it's a possibility. But there is an option for basically low to no durability where we just put the queues in the distributors. We don't have time to work on this, but it would basically be queue everything up in the distributor and pull, perhaps. I don't know. But if you are that allergic to Kafka, submit a design doc. Talk about ways to implement this queue in different ways. I see as a potential of us owning that down the road, but it just can't be for this initial thing. We have an enormous number of pressures, and we are working very hard to deal with the growth we've seen that I've said. And so we a little bit have to do what makes sense for us, but we do long-term also want to do what makes sense for the community. And so we respect that this is a scary thing for some folks. And some people chose Tempo because it's like, oh, object storage only, right? So we're trying to be very upfront about why we're making this change, what the dependency brings, and then maybe long term, well after we deliver the first thing, we might have the ability to restore that kind of object storage only stance. Anything else, team? All right. Super appreciate everybody showing up. This was a great call. A lot of good chatter. Keep posted. I'd love to show TCO improvements in the next couple community calls so that you all get a sense of what you're gaining in exchange for throwing Kafka somewhere in the mix. And yeah, thank you all for showing up. Take care. Enjoy your March. And we will see you in whatever's after March. April. Yeah.
4.
That's right.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Take care.